Hello everyone, I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Dina. Welcome to the Groom Curriculum.
Welcome, and as always, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you all so much for those of you who are listening. And a big thank you to those of you who are watching us on Patreon.
Hello. Always lovely I guess you're seeing us, we're not seeing you, but it's nice to know that you're out there.
It really is, thank you.
That all being said, you know what, Dina? I think life is a pretty stressful thing at times, and the world, especially right now, is a very chaotic place.
This is definitely, sadly, very true.
So rather than try to distract or try to take your guys' minds off of it, we are just really going to add to the reminder that there is a whole lot out there to worry about.
Fun. I personally, I always love the feeling of impending doom.
Right? Like if you have anxiety, why not add to it?
Yeah.
So some of you may have guessed this week's topic just because we've kind of hinted at it a couple of times already.
That's right. So Charlotte brought this up a few weeks ago on Extra Credit, and we asked all of you to let us know if you wanted us to cover it. And the answer seemed to be a big, fat yes.
So here we are. Dear listeners, this week we are going to be talking about the shocking and very worrisome fact that there are a hell of a lot of missing nuclear weapons out there.
We're also going to be exploring some different types of military-related nuclear accidents.
Sorry, guys, it's kind of a yikes this week.
It really is.
It's a little different to our normal, usual content, and it was, kind of like I mentioned, initially going to be an extra credit segment, but there was a lot on it the more I dived in, so we figured it would fill a full episode for you guys.
Absolutely, and honestly, huge props to Charlotte for the research this week, dude. You did a good job.
Oh, I try my best. So, for starters, what does it take for something to be classified as a military nuclear accident?
There are three main things to look at. Number one, it is crucial that there are well-attested and major health risks associated with nuclear materials. I'm going to say, like, this whole episode, this whole thing, it makes me fucking nervous.
It really does. It really does. I watched 2 or 3 documentaries and I read a bunch of different articles, and it's kind of one of those, the further down the rabbit hole you go, the more knowledge you have on the matter, the less comfortable you feel.
Oh, absolutely. This is stuff I feel like the average person is not meant to know.
No, but we've all been watching Fallout.
Yes.
Although I will say that's not the reason I came across this in the first place, purely coincidental. But some of you out there might be kind of relating it since it has to do with nuclear things. So the second criteria for all of this is the operation in question and the materials used have to have been strictly for military purposes.
And finally, for it to be considered an accident, any damage caused cannot be intentional, which is what separates nuclear accidents from nuclear warfare.
In the 1940s, there were 3 military nuclear accidents that happened at the Los Alamos National Lab in New Mexico.
The first reports began on August 24th, 1945, when Harry Daghlian, a physicist, met his end in a pretty terrible way. Harry was involved with the Manhattan Project. This was a collaborative effort between the US, UK, and Canada. Their goal was to produce the first nuclear weapons. And those of you who've seen Oppenheimer, you're going to know about this.
Exactly. These weapons would ultimately result in the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. During an experiment, Harry was attempting to build a neutron reflector. He did this by stacking a set of tungsten carbine bricks around a plutonium core.
I have to say, when I first kind of read the first part of this story, I very much pictured Homer Simpson in the starting
holding the plutonium with his tongs.
And I was like, ha ha ha. And then I read about it and I was like, whoa.
Well, we'll get to it in a minute, but there's an incident with a screwdriver, so you're not far
right
off.
Exactly. So tragically, at the last moment, he dropped one of the bricks onto the core, which caused it to go into the prompt critical region of neutronic behavior.
Basically, that means it caused a more rapid growth at the rate of energy released, which resulted in catastrophe. He attempted to knock the brick off of the assembly, but it simply didn't work. He then had to disassemble the part of the pile in order to stop the reaction.
This led to severe radiation poisoning. His sister and mother were flown in to take care of him. Harry fell into a coma shortly after and was pronounced dead 25 days after the accident.
So it took just over 3 weeks to kill him after a very short exposure to a very small amount of
And that's the
plutonium.
thing, it was quick.
Very quick. There is a picture of Harry's right hand that was taken 9 days after the accident, and it's severely burnt and blistered. The core that he was working on would be later dubbed the Demon Core.
In an attempt to prevent further tragedy from happening, a committee was formed to review similar experiments and ensure no one else would get hurt. However, things didn't really work out that way.
No, because on May 21st of 1946, so just under a year later, tragedy struck again. This time it was a colleague of Harry Daghlian's, a Canadian physicist named Louis Slotin. While under the watchful eye of 7 other experts, Louis began to perform an experiment that would ideally result in a fission reaction.
This was to be done using the exact same demon core that had killed Harry. He was supposed to place 2 half spheres of a neutron reflector around the core. He grabbed one with his left hand and maintained the separation of the cores with a screwdriver.
And for the record, this is not at all how it's supposed to be done. As he was doing this, the screwdriver slipped, which caused one of the half spheres to fall. This resulted in a burst of radiation.
Louis would say that he experienced a sour taste in his mouth and burning in his hand. Shortly after, he vomited and was taken to the hospital, but it was too late. The other men were able to be treated for radiation poisoning and they did survive. However, 3 of them died later of conditions that were linked to the radiation that they were exposed to.
And if this doesn't sound bad enough, in the 1950s, 28 similar events were reported, with another 24 in the 60s. Between the 70s and the 2010s, there were 22 more.
And these are only the ones that we know about.
Exactly. But all of these events are absolutely nothing compared to what the Department of Defense refers to as faded giants.
Faded giants really sounds like a peaceful thing to me, doesn't it?
Honestly, either that or it sounds like a weed strain.
Dude, I totally wanted to put that in the script. I was like, but it reminds me of either a weed strain or something out of Skyrim.
Oh yeah, like the we're going to see the faded giants or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
But as peaceful as it sounds, it's actually kind of the opposite. A faded giant is thankfully a rare event when a nuclear reactor is involved in an accident. Something like this was seen in the year 2000 when the Russian military attacked the submarine Kursk, causing it to sink to the bottom of the Barents Sea.
All 118 people on board were killed, and I desperately want to cover this story. Holy crap.
It's a crazy, crazy one. Because the main problem, among with the obvious, was aboard the Kursk was not just 1, but 2 nuclear reactors.
An initial event was recorded with a 1.5 reading on the Richter scale. It was felt 250 kilometers away from Norway. 2 minutes and 14 seconds after the first event, a 4.2 reading was recorded.
This may not sound like much, but it means that the second event was 250 times larger, equaling to about 2 or 3 tons of TNT.
This is a story wrought with tragedy, cover-ups, and of course, conspiracy. And we don't want to get too far into it because honestly, like, it's on the list to be covered.
Oh, I want to deep dive into that one. Haha, submarine fun.
Ooh, love it.
Next up on the nuclear accident list, we have bent spears.
This is a name given to a significant incident involving a nuclear weapon. A very concerning example of this was seen as recently as 2007.
6 AGM-129 ACM cruise missiles were each loaded with their own nuclear warhead and were accidentally transported to Barksdale Air Force in Louisiana. They were supposed to be removed from the transport plane, but for some reason, that step was missed.
They were missing for a total of 36 hours. During that time, they were not protected by security precautions and they were just there. Like they were just left there.
Yeah, they just sat on the ramp for 36 hours. No one was watching them. No one knew they were there. Just 6 nuclear armed missiles.
The more I read the research that you did on this, the more I thought to myself, like, I've seen this action movie before and I thought it was outlandish, but apparently it's not.
I guess it just always goes to say that the truth is far stranger than
It
fiction.
really is.
Unlike other events that we've covered so far, no one was hurt when this incident happened, but I think we can all agree that this would have been really, really freaking bad.
So next up, we have the concept of an empty quiver.
So this is something that the entertainment industry really likes to cover. This is the term used when a fully functioning nuclear weapon is either seized or stolen. This is one of the most obvious reasons that countries find it important to not only have great security for their weapons, but to also kind of have it be known that you do not mess with that country's nukes.
They also really don't like to talk about their
Mm-mm.
nukes. For example, almost everything to do with nuclear weapons is classified, and that includes the location of these bombs.
When I was watching documentaries on these, one of the experts that was talking about them said anything, at least in the US and pretty much globally, anything to do with nukes is essentially born classified.
Absolutely.
So even just having a conversation with your coworker about a nuke is considered classified information. Even though it's nothing official, it's not on paper,
Mhm.
your conversation is considered classified immediately.
Yeah, you tell that thing to the wrong person, and suddenly you have World War III on your hands.
Yeah, I mean, loose lips sink ships.
They sure do.
Some bombs the United States is very much aware of. And while we don't know where they are, they sure do.
As they should.
Right? However, this also includes the close location of lost bombs.
And this brings up to one of the most concerning and very, very real points of our discussion today, code name Broken Arrow.
This is designated for an accidental event that involves nuclear weapons or warheads. It is serious, of course, but not serious enough to create the risk of nuclear war.
Now, this includes accidental explosions, public hazards, radioactive contamination, and of course, lost weapons.
And something horrifying to keep you awake at night is the fact that the Pentagon has reported 32 broken arrow incidents.
However, recently declassified documents show that this has most likely happened hundreds of times.
Oh dear.
These incidents range from something as small as sprinklers accidentally being set off in weapon storage compartments to things as nefarious as weapons burning for up to 2 hours before anyone noticed.
And one fun fact I will interject here is that during the 1950s, when the nukes really took off for most of the world, and people were like, if it can hold a nuclear detonation, we want it to happen. So there were nuclear bombs from the size of backpacks all the way up to a 43,000-pound bomb.
Oh my god.
Sorry.
I hate it. I like this whole thing just stresses me out so much because I'm just like I maintain there's certain things that the average person, I mean, I think we all should know things, but there's some things that like maybe it's okay. Ignorance is bliss.
Totally. I think there are definitely certain things. And if you're one of those people that's gotten to this point and you're feeling a little too anxious, we don't blame you.
No.
That is totally okay. If you need to pause this, go make yourself a cup of tea,
Mhm.
maybe smoke some wacky backy, bring your nerves back down.
Yeah, take a deep breath.
Yeah, absolutely. We get it. Absolutely. The good news, having said all that,
Yes.
is that these events are a lot less common than they were between the 50s and 80s, mainly just because more safety precautions are being taken.
So at least somewhat of a lesson has been learned.
Yeah, somewhat.
However, there is one final and very concerning thing that we want to talk about today.
Yeah, we've saved the best for last.
Dear listeners, there are currently At least. I will say at least because there's stuff we don't know about.
Hmm.
12, you heard that right. 12 US nuclear bombs that are currently considered lost.
And to make it worse, some of them are very much in the reach of the public.
As far as we know, it all started in February 1950 when a B 46 bomber that was transporting a nuclear bomb experienced severe complications. It lost power in 3 of its 6 engines.
As the plane began to descend at an alarming rate, the captain ordered that the bomb be dumped.
The bomb itself wasn't armed, so they weren't exactly sure what the effects of this would be, but they felt that they didn't really have any other choice. The TNT bomb exploded at 3,850 feet, which caused a bright flash along with a massive shockwave.
So, if you guys are kind of wondering about the TNT thing,
Yeah,
put very simply, because I am not a physicist and I'm not a nuclear physicist at that,
we sure aren't.
what happens is the nuclear charge is sort of in the middle. If you imagine it like an orange, because that's about the size of nuclear material that was used to bomb Nagasaki,
Hmm.
just the size of an orange. And it is packed and packed and packed with TNT. So the initial charge of TNT explodes. And as that explodes, it compresses your little orange of nuclear material down to the size of a tennis ball, and then that creates the detonation in the nuclear material that is the nuclear bomb.
Wow.
So, just because a nuclear bomb isn't armed does not mean it is not dangerous because it is still a lot of TNT.
That is a really good point because I mean, some of
Yes.
these numbers are just like I said, again, I'm going to repeat myself a lot. It's stressful.
It really is. So the crew eventually evacuated the plane over Vancouver Island before it crashed mere moments later. The nuclear components from this nuclear weapon were never found.
A mere 8 months later, disaster struck again. This time, a B 50 bomber lost power in 2 of its engines, and the bomb on board was thrown into the St. Lawrence River. Then TNT detonated, but once again, the nuclear components were never found.
I will say I was a little surprised to see it how many of these incidents happened over Canada because we have one over Vancouver
Yep.
Island and then we've had one in the St. Lawrence River which runs through Ontario and Quebec in Canada. So that's fun.
I listened to a podcast about the Manhattan Project, and one of the things that they talked about quite heavily was that the United States was very careful about what they did with the United States. So,
Yes,
more often than not, what they would do is they would go to Canada or the UK and be like, hey, we have this idea, we have this experiment we want to do. Why don't you try it out?
that's exactly what happened. On July 29th, 1957, a C 124 cargo plane was carrying 3 Mark 5 nuclear bombs from Delaware when it lost power in 2 of its engines over Atlantic City.
Now, that's a really very recurring theme, isn't it?
It is, and partially one of the reasons why we didn't see as many nuclear accidents after the 1980s is because aircraft safety also improved.
I'm glad that it did.
In an attempt to save the plane and those aboard, they decided to eject some of the bombs. One was thrown out at 4,500 feet and the second at 2,500. Both of the bombs went into the water below, but did not detonate.
Major efforts were made to find these bombs, but all attempts were unsuccessful. As far as everyone's concerned, they are still very much out there.
Just off the coast in New Jersey, of all places.
Ugh.
The following year, on February 5th, a simulated combat mission was being conducted in Florida. They wanted to make the mission as authentic as possible, so they flew a B 47 bomber with live nuclear weapons on board.
At approximately 3:30 a.m., an F-86 fighter slammed into the wing of the plane, which damaged the fuselage. The plane was rerouted to Savannah, Georgia for an emergency landing. 3 attempts were made to land the plane, but each proved to be unsuccessful. The reality of the situation was that the bomb could potentially explode while over Savannah, which would very much endanger the people there.
The decision was made to dump the bomb into the mouth of the Savannah River from 7,200 feet. The plane was then landed safely. Divers from the Navy were instructed to go out and search the water for the bomb.
3 letters between the Atomic Energy Commission and US Congress stated that the bomb did indeed have its nuclear capsule, meaning that it was a complete weapon.
A fourth letter denied this. However, after 6 years of questioning and investigation, it was revealed that the bomb was indeed very well armed. And not only that, the Department of Defense confirmed that it could someday be found, and possibly not by them.
Yikes!
Yeah, so they're out there. Apparently, the mouth of the river where it landed is very swampy, very boggy, and they think likely what happened was the weight of it just sunk it so down in the mud and the silt and everything. And they've scanned the areas. Obviously, they have Geiger counters and search equipment that would
Yeah,
pick up on nuclear material, but no luck so far.
they're out there.
And it only gets worse.
On January 24th, 1961, a B 52 bomber with two 20 megaton hydrogen bombs met its refueling tanker off the coast of North Carolina shortly after it experienced a fuel leak in its right wing.
This was particularly concerning due to the fact that at full, the plane had approximately 181,000 liters of fuel aboard. As fuel poured out of the wing, the plane became more and more unbalanced.
It was directed to the Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina, but before they could land, the right wing burst into flames. The plane then exploded. 5 of the crew on board were able to evacuate in time, but 5 others did not make it. Before the plane crashed, the bombs were thrown out onto some farmland. One was recovered, but the other is still considered lost.
The US has not only had this happen in their own airspace. An A-4 Seahawk with a B-43 nuclear bomb was on board the deck of the USS I always screw this one up. Ticonderoga.
You gotta sound
Ticonderoga.
that one out.
Oh my god, the USS Ticonderoga when it rolled off the deck. For those of you who aren't sure because of my pronunciation, the USS Ticonderoga is a aircraft carrier. This plane rolled off, and the bomb, plane, and pilot were never found.
Meanwhile, in Greenland, a B 52 crashed on an ice cap near Thule Air Force Base with 4 explosives on board. All of them detonated, and one of the 4 secondaries was lost because it burnt through the ice cap itself.
Yeah, so somewhere under the glacier, there's just a burnt out piece of nuclear material.
Fantastic.
Another weapon was lost off the coast of Whidbey Island in Washington when a Navy P-5M was carrying a nuclear anti-submarine depth charge. It was forced to make an emergency landing after the engine caught fire. The weapon was ejected and never found. And just to clarify, a Navy P-5M is a seaplane.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's a plane that lands on the water.
Ugh. So, okay, the last one that we're going to talk about today ended a little differently. On January 17th, 1966, another B 52 bomber was flying over Palomares, Spain, with 4 nuclear bombs on board. While in the air, it collided with the KC 135 tanker. Between the 2 planes were 11 crew, only 4 of them survived.
When I was researching into this, because now that's 2 incidents with tankers. So, and to be clear, this is air-to-air refueling.
Oh,
Which I've never given much thought before. I've seen it done in the movies.
yeah.
And when you see it done, it seems so smooth and so flawless, and the planes just make it look easy. But I guess it is one of the most difficult aerial maneuvers to pull off, and it's also, because of the sheer amounts of fuel, the most dangerous.
Yeah.
Not to mention nuclear bombs. Like, I don't know. These pilots, they must start as young men, and then within like 10 years of being a pilot, they must just look wizened and old from the stress.
Yeah, it's like a 30-year-old guy and he looks like 75
Yeah.
and just like shell shocked. Like, I mean, this to me just seems, again, I'm saying it once again, it's fucking stressful, dude.
They basically said when it came to pilots that were flying these missions with nuclear bombs on board, that either they absolutely hated it and wanted nothing to do with it and wanted to be transferred to somewhere else immediately, or they were like the adrenaline junkies that just like lived for it, right?
Yeah.
And your average person is going to be like, no thank you, I'm good. I choose life.
Me too. I mean, I'm definitely, like, more than average here because, like, I'm thinking about this and I can't even fathom that
Mm-mm,
level of responsibility.
absolutely not. So after the crash, the four weapons fell a distance of 30,000 feet. Two detonated on impact with the Earth, which resulted in a severe amount of nuclear material spreading throughout the surrounding area. The third did not detonate.
The fourth took a little while to find. However, because this happened over airspace belonging to Spain, it wasn't as hush hush as some of the others we've mentioned. Protests began happening almost immediately, despite the fact that the US attempted to deny that nuclear weapons had been involved in the first place.
Yeah, for 3 days they were like, no, 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 no. And then on the fourth day, they had to be like, we lied. Sorry, guys. It was
Oopsie.
definitely nuclear. It took $50 million and 12,000 personnel 3 months to find it. They searched through rough terrain, abandoned mine shafts, and even a 12,000-foot
Oof.
underwater trench. Like, this isn't just a bomb that's happening in the middle of the desert where it's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, we can literally see everything for 200 kilometers, we'll find it.
Yeah.
This is a myriad of different
Ugh.
environments. Eventually, it was located 2,250 feet underwater. Miraculously, it was found teetering on the edge of the trench. Had it fallen all the way in, this would have been catastrophic.
When it was found, the US displayed it publicly to prove that the whole ordeal was in fact over. However, they were required to pay $600,000 to 522 Palomares residents, and they also built them a desalinization plant. I think they deserved a hell of a lot more
A
than that.
hell of a lot more, but I mean, what are you going to do against the big bad US government?
Yep.
The weapons that we've mentioned today are just a glimpse into the total amount out there that have been lost, many of which are still missing. And one thing I do want to point out, the US are really the only country that have publicly reported them. And that was only after a lot of digging and a lot of things that were
Yep.
made declassified years and years after. The Brits really haven't admitted to anything. The French haven't, and they had nukes as well.
Mhm.
And there's a few other NATO countries that had nukes, and the US basically says, "Look, if we were messing around with them,
Oh, yeah.
there's no way that the others weren't also messing around with
And
them."
here's the thing, I tried to find out the number of reported missing nukes worldwide. That
Mhm.
information is not available. We're never gonna know that. So, the fact that the US is saying, "Hey, here's the ones that, first of all, we want you to know about."
Very true.
Who else had this happen? Because if it's happening to the US, I guarantee you they're not the only ones.
No, absolutely not. And then even it's almost the devil you know versus the devil you don't, because we have countries like the US, Canada, the UK, etc. They're the devils we're familiar with, if you will.
Mhm.
But then take a quick look over to our friends in North Korea.
Yes.
What are they doing?
And that's the thing, we're not gonna know about any of this stuff. This is not information that the average person is ever going to get because a lot of these countries, they're not willing to be like, "Hey, we fucked up
No,
big time."
absolutely not. And they theorize, or at least the people who want to see this information made
Mhm.
declassified, a lot of it is embarrassment value.
Of course it
They're
is.
embarrassed to admit something went wrong, which is not an excuse when people could be in danger,
Yeah.
or, for example, we hear of people coming into contact with radiation and dying years after the fact,
Yes.
right? Even, say, soldiers on ships that witnessed the nuclear tests by like Bikini Atoll and stuff
Mhm.
like that. They weren't even remotely close per se to the actual detonation, and many of them suffered with cancer and diseases long after due to the radiation exposure. So pretty scary stuff. One thing I will leave you with, just a thought I had, and this is just simply a theory. um, what if some of these particular nukes weren't found because someone else got to them
Oh my
first?
god, I was thinking that this whole time because again, I'm like, this is an action movie. And the other thing too is like we mentioned earlier, these countries, especially the US, they don't want to know how many, like, they don't want other countries to know how many nukes
Mm-hmm.
they have. They don't want to know about the security precautions. So they definitely don't want other people to know about the mess ups. And other countries are going to be exactly in the same boat. This isn't information that people are just willingly sharing with one another because you don't want them to know if you have them, but you really don't want people to know the little amount of control that you have over them.
Absolutely. It's kind of like, well, maybe we have them. And yes, we do. So don't attack. But no, we don't, because don't steal them. But
Yes.
we might. But don't even fucking look at me.
But if you do have them, we know exactly where all of them are.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've seen a James Bond film, it's kind of the overarching theme for
Yeah.
a good many of them. All right. Well, I mean, I guess the ones we have talked about are not really considered a threat, but the whole concept is a truly, truly horrifying thing.
This wasn't going to be an episode that was going to help y'all de-stress or anything like that by any means. I mean, this is you're going to have some feelings towards the end of this, but my only advice is this is just what they want us to know, and so don't even try to think about what they don't want us to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I still haven't finished Fallout, all that being said.
Really?
I know.
Girl, you gotta get to it.
I do. I have 2 episodes left. We will definitely discuss more when I have. We talked about it in a little bit more depth in our last extra credit episode, so if you want to go check that out, feel free. We've kind of discussed maybe doing a mini episode on just talking about Fallout. I know it's not our usual content, but hey, this is our show, and as the great Trixie Mattel and Katya say, we'll talk about whatever we want because it's our show.
Yeah, we will.
What else we got? Oh, of course. Can't forget the old patrons over on Patreon.
No, hello, we're waving to you right now. Don't forget, if you do sign up for our Patreon, you get all sorts of perks. You get early episode reveals, you get access to our Discord, you may even get your name shouted out on the episodes. There is so much out there, and the biggest thing that we're doing on there is you get to see us. Hello.
Hello. We have saved the video content for the patrons, but that being said, you can see clips of us over on YouTube and the Tiki Talks.
Yeah, apparently the Tiki Talks doesn't like it when we talk shit about David Berkowitz. We got in trouble for that today.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
I don't know. It was like, you're talking about drugs, alcohol, and voting fraud or something like that. And I was like, we just said he was old.
We literally were just surprised he was still alive.
Censorship, man.
Oh, man. First Amendment rights. Just kidding. We live in Canada. We have a slightly different First Amendment.
All right. A huge shout out to those beautiful, beautiful, glorious people on Patreon. Thank you so much to Lisa, Brian, Hillary, Mayhem Mudkip, Bob, Kevinus Musicus, Judy, Atlantean Jedi, and Steven Centauri. We love ya.
We love you. Thank you so much. Y'all are the Titty City.
Thank you all so, so much for listening. This has been the Grim Curriculum.
Oh my god, sorry. I was in my head, I was like, extra credit. Fucking idiot. Okay, let's try this again. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you all so much for listening. This has been
the Grim Curriculum. And I have a short but fun fact for you today.
Okay.
If everyone on Earth had a 1v1 fight, it would only take 33 rounds to have a reigning champion.
What? I fucking love that!
Isn't that cool? That's math for you.
I love that.
Yeah.
Ooh.